Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Heart Space Podcast. My name is Ladilla, and I'm your host. This podcast was created out of my personal desire to have meaningful conversations with humans that inspire my heart. And today, I have the honor of jamming with Alyssa Troob. Alyssa is a holistic registered dietitian nutritionist and a certified human design analysis. She has worked with hundreds of humans all around the world to guide them through the avenues of their unique nourishment, myself included. During our chat today, we dive into the juicy subject of food, nourishment, disordered eating patterns, and the stigma behind the right way to eat. This conversation comes from a place of wanting to stoke compassionate curiosity in those who listen, because both Alyssa and I feel that returning to the wisdom of our bodies is a foundational piece of healing and living a fulfilled, happy life, really. We chat about spiritual bypassing, diet fads, grounding practices, breathwork, pleasure practices, and how important it is to honor our humanness as the highest spiritual practice that we can do while we're here. I'm truly excited to share Alyssa with you. She's impacted my life hugely as we worked together one-on-one earlier this year. And it's such a source of inspiration and knowledge for everyone she meets. Again, thank you for being here and being such a crucial part of the Heart Space community. I love you. Enjoy this episode. Alyssa Troob, like boob.
Welcome to
welcome to the show. Welcome. Hi.
That can be the end, so that if people listen through the whole thing, they get that little laughter.
Yeah. I'm so happy you're here. I enjoyed our conversation so much. We actually met in person the other day, which was even more lovely than virtually.
Agreed.
Yeah, I want you to introduce yourself, and then I'll kind of swing it around of how you've influenced my life.
Sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone listening. My name is Alyssa Troob, and I'm a registered dietitian and human design analyst. As soon as I say registered dietitian, I always get like the deer in the headlights look from like 90% of people, because they're like, oh my gosh, is she the food police? So I always, whenever I'm on a podcast, I'm like, hold on, before you shut this off, because you start having food anxiety, don't do it. I'm not the food police.
No, opposite.
How I prefer, in fact, to even give myself a title is the nourishment evangelist. And I'm sure that Leela can kind of speak to this too, and we'll dive into it. But yeah, that's what's up for me. I'm the nourishment evangelist.
I love that. How did you start that? Like, how does someone just accidentally become that? Or is it very intentional? Were you raised like that? Like, no. What? It's not everyone's like forte. So how'd that happen?
Becoming the nourishment evangelist, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Honestly, through my own experience. So from the time I really waded into what it means to be well and to nourish, I was humbled many a time. And the humbling started by thinking I was doing something healthy and having it kind of trend toward disordered eating. I was in my freshman year of high school. And I very quickly, upon losing my period and my radiance and my sparkle and my joy and my body, and any sense of heat that I had, just freezing all the time, realized, oh, this health, like this quote unquote, for those of you who can't see the video, this health is not actually healthy. This is like a very specific way of eating. And I want to learn what's actually healthy for me, because I can tell, even though this gave me physical results, I don't feel good. And so the most thorough path to learning that for me just felt like, hey, I want to study the dietetic sciences, like nutritional biochemistry and nutrition through the life cycle and all of those kind of things. And also, as I was studying that, having my own practice, my own experience, my own experiential practice, that was like, hey, I'm learning all of this information, and I'm also practicing behind the scenes my own experience, walking through nourishment, and realizing that not everything I'm learning is the right thing for me, the right thing being the only way, the rule, And so when I talk about nourishment, one of the things that's implied is just the individuality of it. Like, everyone has such individual needs. And so it really is, and that's what I, spread the word of. It's like, hey, I'm the nourishment evangelist because I'm going to, if you work with me, if you're around me, like say, hey, what's the best for you? Like, what are you feeling? And that's how that has bloomed. Just, I mean, the word evangelist has its own stigma.
Yeah, it's perfect. Good choice. I love it.
Paint this picture every time I say I think of myself just dressed in these robes, like in town square, just yelling, nourish yourself, like,
Love it. Yeah, it's one thing that you said that really hit home for me is, and I see this, I work with women also, and I've went through my process of disordered eating patterns, and I've spoken on that on other episodes. Actually, Courtney and I spoke about it a little bit. But one thing that stuck out was this disconnection from our own personal experience and this giving away of power, or just keeping the like wisdom or the power outside of us, meaning like Cosmo magazine said this, or like that Instagram said this, so like that must be truth, versus actually living inside of our body enough to be able to tell, do I actually feel good? Like, is this helping? Like you said, like that your sparkle went away and that you were like, your heat went away. It's like, those are things you only notice inside of your body. And that I can only notice inside of my body, like what's actually happening for me. And we do that a lot though, as a humanity, think that something outside of us has more power than our own personal experience. And that really keeps us away from being sovereign and being able to just choose like what is actually helping me feel healthy and whole and happy, and kind of keeps us in this rat race of perpetual like next thing, like one of these things out there is going to make me happy in here. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen around anything, like literally anything. So it's fascinating. And I know that because we work together too, so I was having horrible migraines for, honestly, I started getting them when I was like 15. And they were kind of spawned on by like stress or cyclical patterns, or like a little bit more random, or like not enough sleep. And then about 3 years ago, they became extremely cyclical. I would get them every time right before I'd have my period or around ovulation. And it's like I didn't notice or something. It's like I knew that, like it's almost like they would just rack me whenever they came, and then I wouldn't really pay attention to the rhythm that they had in my life until it got so annoying and so painful. And 2020 was like I had also had higher stress, and that was probably year 3 of being totally vegan. And I never really ate much animal products growing up because my family didn't. But I had like, after I went to India, I was like, I'm not eat any dairy or anything. And I didn't notice that when I cut those things out after a period of time, my migraines got worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where they were like horrible, like 3 or 4 days at a time, having to take medication. I was throwing up if I didn't. It was light sensitive. They were like, I couldn't lay down to sleep because there's too much blood would go to my head. It would feel like my head was actually going to pop. And they were so bad. But that's when I reached out to you, because I was like, okay, I'm also not a uneducated person around nutrition either. I studied physiology and kinesiology in college. I took advanced exercise nutrition. I have I've studied Ayurveda in extensive amounts. I went through my own healing journey around autoimmunity and listened to every freaking podcast and read every single book. And like, I wasn't uneducated either. Absolutely. And I was still missing the mark a little bit around like, this huge thing is happening every month, and I'm obviously missing like a big piece for me. And that's when I reached out to you, because I was like, I need some help here. And that was incredible, because I have only had, it's October and we worked together at the beginning of the year, and I think I've had 4 migraines this year, when I used to have like 3 or 4 a month.
Right.
That's huge. That is huge for me. Like in every cycle I go through and I don't have one, I almost don't want to say anything because I don't want to like jinx one coming on. I'm like, and just cruise into the next day. It's really, really incredible. So I have so much gratitude personally for you in my heart, and like your compassionate encouragement towards making some shifts that I needed for me personally, and just being like, let's try it out and see how you actually feel. So that was massive. I don't know if you want to segue into any of your stuff or how you have seen that in other areas of your work for people actually just tuning into their own experience and being able to kind of break the social pressure or constructs around what dieting is or how we should be eating, quote unquote.
Yeah. And before I, kind of dive into what I would love to unpack together, something that I just want to reflect back to you, because I think that this is where there's almost like a pause or like a holding of the inhale where people get a little bit of trepidation, where you said, I'm not uneducated. And I think the thing we forget about education is that it's a significant conditioning factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like education is incredible and it molds our brains to perceive information a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's fabulous. And it also can be a shortcoming, right? And so it's not uncommon for the people I work with to be these people who, from the outside they look amazing, they are vivacious and radiant and educated, and they're also sitting there behind the scenes like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Why is this working?
Yeah.
And this is like the perfect segue, so I'm glad you just shared this. I'd love to unpack this kind of concept around, it's almost like this concept of spiritual bypassing, but through using these spiritually or socially sanctioned diets to bypass learning how to fundamentally nourish ourselves. And that's something that, whether we're in the spiritual community or we're not, this has been happening since probably industrial agriculture and since there was a market to sell diets. It's not like this is just a new thing. This has been happening since our great grandmothers, or maybe our grandmothers, maybe like the last 2-3 generations primarily. But it's this thing that I see way more than normal, where people who are generally healthy, like if you put them in a doctor's office and you said, what do you eat? How do you move? They'd say vegan, vegetarian, plant-based. I exercise daily. I do all these things. I meditate. And okay, so what's wrong with you? Well, I must have something wrong with me because I'm having migraines. I'm having horrible digestive distress. Those are the ones people are willing to talk about. Then there's things like low energy, depression, anxiety,
menstrual issues,
sex drive, amenorrhea, an absence of a period or an irregular period. And those are the ones that we all kind of do the tongue in cheek and we tell our friends, but we don't necessarily tell health professionals because that would mean that there is something off actually. Whereas often digestive distress can be kind of bent back into a food intolerance, which sometimes it for sure is related to that. And just as many times it's not. And so, same thing with the migraines. Do you want to say something? I just saw you like.
No, it's just such a good subject. I'm glad that we're talking about it because there's so much here. And I'm just thinking about, like it needs to be aired out and dried, this whole topic. Like it needs, like we need to unpack it and bring all of this up. Like this is all normal and happening for many people. And like when we have conversation around things without criticism or judgment or assumption or like, because also it's such a hot topic that just the language or like the conversation around it, different diet styles or lifestyle choices with anything right now, it can just be so like triggering or enlivening for people that then the full depth of the conversation can't happen because there's too much like personal bias involved or trying to get people to change their mind involved. And it's just like, how can any like actual communion between two people or two like different ideas that both could maybe lead to nourishment even have a place to connect if we can't have the conversation? So I'm just thinking of how important conversations around important topics are necessary and like being in a regulated state to have them, open to hear someone else, and like it's important. So important. Like every topic. But
thank you for that, because let me say this before we dive in any further. There is no one right way and there's also no wrong way. And that, really let that ripple through your body before you hear anything else, and maybe even hit pause and just take a couple of deep breaths, like really deep breaths, and just say, hey, there is no wrong way. And also there's nothing done in vain. And this is something that I have to remind. I don't have to, I get to remind people all the time, because I've had this experience too, and I study this stuff, I sit in it, I marinate in it, and it's still my experience being a human, educated how I am, to have the same experience. So when, for those of you who don't know me, I'm certainly not speaking in any kind of a way that says, hey, you're doing it wrong, but more to say, hey, this is a really common manifestation, this kind of bypassing of learning how to reel in our sovereignty, how to reclaim our inner authority, how to say, hey, what do I actually need here? As essentially informed by your body's communication. Because for many of us, like plant-based diet might be phenomenal, and we might need to supplement it with some chicken livers that are local, before we bleed, just to re-up on the minerals that have gone into building the endometrium and that get lost. There's a bajillion ways to do this, and it's not going to necessarily fit into the structure or model of a diet. And this is where the bypassing comes in. And it's not to say that you or me or anyone who's followed a diet is doing something wrong. It's to say diets have a really good intention. And because they're so broad stroke, they generally miss the mark. But we put them on as rules, right? So we start following the rules of any given diet. And in doing so, we dissociate. We dissociate from the migraines, the missed menstrual cycle, or missed period, I should say, therefore missed ovulation or late ovulation, the lack of sleeping well, the lack of sex drive, the anxiousness. That's one that always people, oh, I'm so anxious. I'm like, well, okay, how are you eating? And it's not to say you've got to be eating perfect, but if you're, let's just say, restricting food over a long amount of time, our brain chemicals are made from our food, right? Amino acids, neurotransmitters, all of the vitamins and minerals are cofactors that we need to build healthy brain chemistry, right? And so if there's true depletion without any kind of repletion, what ends up happening is anxiousness becomes a baseline norm for people because their blood sugar is not regulated, their brain chemistry is off. And this happens more often than any of us give credit to. And I only know this from working with so many highly educated, incredibly high functioning humans who, when they actually start diving in, they're like, wow, I actually don't really know how to eat. I always eat based on a model, the paleo diet, the meat only diet, the vegan diet, the Mediterranean diet. And what's fascinating is that this isn't uncommon. It's more common than not. I mean, I've done it. I went through college trying all different kinds of diets. While you'd think I'd be, the educated, quote unquote one, this isn't just you or me. This is a lot of damn people.
Yeah. Man, there was one thing that you said and it triggered something, but then I kept following your sentence and I lost it. I think it had to do with the cycle, but I lost it.
I'll jump off on it if you want. I did this, and our bodies are always communicating with us. And if you're, regardless of if you are a human in a female body or a human in a male body, or you don't identify as either, there are so many feedback mechanisms. And there are things that, think about how long humans have existed on the earth and how closely we have evolved with day-night cycles, light, dark, right? Seasons, food availability. Think about where you're from, your ethnicity. Think about where those people lived. Did they live high up in the mountains? Did they live down by the sea? Did they have valleys? Were they at, the equator? Were they far north? And then think about like their more ancestral diet. It's not to say you have to follow it, but are the spiritually sanctioned, diets or the fad diets, are those diets taking that into account? And if you're trying on those diets and you're getting feedback from your body going, migraine when I start to, drop down from estrogen, migraine because I'm dehydrated, migraine because I don't have enough amino acids, or lost period because you're not getting enough fuel to have enough body fat, whatever the thing, and you're blindly, which we all do it, I, you, everyone, we all do this, not pointing the finger at anyone listening here. We all do this because this is what we're educated to do. But when we get any kind of information around this is the way, this is revolutionary, look at what this research says, we kind of fetishize that, right? That research, that science says intermittent fasting is great for everyone. And it's, yeah, there's benefits to it. There's benefits to lots of different ways of eating. And we have to slow down and say, when I try this on for myself, how is my body responding?
Yeah. That's the piece, what I thought of before was this conditioning. I know for me and a lot of the women I work with, for the longest time, I grew up, my family is Greek. We have a catering company from our house. I don't know if I ever told you that, but there was like the whole bottom floor of my house was a big commercial kitchen. There was always food around, but I was also a competitive gymnast and had very restrictive eating, years of anorexia and just really, truly starving myself. And now I suffer the effects of that with my joints aching and different things that just over exercise and under, like not enough nutrition. And I had educated parents, and they did eat well and whatever, so the whole gamut. There's no blame on any of that. It just was. And I'm honestly grateful for it too, because it's stoked my curiosity, and it probably got me into yoga and healing the relationship with my body and learning how to actually live inside of my body. But the thing that came up was when you said the anxiety piece of the disconnection between what's happening, how we're feeling in our life, and food, and the way we nourish, not even just food, but that every avenue that we nourish ourselves, and not learning how to live presently enough to realize that they have to do with each other. They are absolutely connected. Like I remember thinking in my younger years that like I really just attributed food to either being fat or skinny. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't whether my joints were hurting at gymnastics practice. It wasn't whether I was sad or anxious. It wasn't whether I was able to sleep or not. It wasn't whether I was able to poop well, or my face, whether I had acne. It wasn't whether like none of or my allergies or my immune system. So many other things I can look back and be like, wow, all of that was happening. And all I was worried about was whether that macaroni and cheese or that carrot or whatever it was going to cause me to have cellulite on my thighs. That's all I could think about. And I was so obsessed with it for so long. And there's still there's so much energy around that still. I'm so deeply grateful that I have worked through that and spent a lot of time healing that. So that my mind does not revolve around thinking about food constantly. But I remember days when I was younger that all I thought about was like whether I was fat or not and what this food was going to do to me in that regard. I was not thinking about whether this food is going to ground me, replenish me, heal my cells, rejuvenate my cells, enhance my vision, grow my hair, like, like boost collagen in my face, like it increase my circulation, also help my ability to actually be a present, calm, peaceful person. Like food does that. And it is such a, because I work in the field of yoga and spirituality, and I lead retreats and trainings, and there's I just remember, and I know you cook as well. You're going to cook for our steamboat retreat. I'm actually in Colorado right now, and we end up postponing it. But when people come on retreats or teacher training and they eat the menu that I created for them and a chef prepared for them, made of actually nourishing, like nutrient dense, delicious food, nothing's processed. They're not drinking alcohol. They're not really eating sugar. They're just drinking a shitload of water. They're in the sunshine. They're in nature. They're breathing. They're eating well. They're around happy people. I don't even have to say like 2 words and their life has changed.
Yep.
Like I could literally be like, and I'll just hang out for 7 days. Like these are the things I'm going to put in place for you. Yes. And they thrive, and it happens within like 24 hours. And I do think that all those different avenues of nourishment, like that really is what that container is. It's just like uploading all the things that naturally help people feel good and happy and connected and grounded and peaceful and taken care of. And it all comes back to like us paying attention to what we're bringing inside of our bodies. Like and actually living inside of our bodies to notice that. It's not about what the body looks like, it's about how the body feels. And I think if we think about that long enough, we recognize that. But we have to slow down enough. At least for me, I had to like actually practice a presence and like let go of the things that were causing me to not want to live inside of my body, which was equal parts like trauma therapy, but also just starting to nourish myself and slow down and ground. And then I realized like, wow, the simplest practices are actually the most spiritual.
Yes. Right.
Just eating this food slowly, being grateful for it, and paying attention to my body while it happens helps me be a better, more whole human, more than, I don't know, elaborate Instagram live or whatever I might do that might make me seem like I'm so much better of a human. It's so simple. I think that's why a lot of the most valuable practices around being just a whole grounded human are overlooked because they're just so simple.
Right. Totally. I 100% agree with everything you just said. And it speaks to the interconnectedness piece, right? It's like, it is so woven together so tightly that it's easy for us to miss, especially when the conditioning says, oh, this diet fixes everything. You don't have to think about it, right? And so this is where I love that you tied back into the avenues of nourishment, because that is something that we also overlook, right? Our awareness, and you alluded to this, gets so wrapped around what our body looks like that we forget structure equals function, right? We forget, what am I doing with my body? That's what's going to drive its structure, and its structure is its physical appearance, right? And hey, can I see that its structure allows for function, and therefore maybe shift my perspective around what it looks like, because hey, what am I doing with it?
Mm-hmm.
And second to that is, so often, and I see this more and more and more, raising my hand over here behind the scenes too, it's really satisfying and gratifying to have a spiritual practice and to be moving through like a time where it's relatively normal to have conversations about breath work, astrology, human design, Zen, Buddhism. Like, there's just so much rich knowledge out there. And something that I see fairly regularly again, behind the scenes, is sometimes getting so wrapped in that, because again, we're conditioned to be so mentally aware that we forget to do all the things you just alluded to, the things that are the grounding practices that do immediately like slap us in the face in the best way and go, hey, like, you're a human, enjoy this experience of feeling sunlight hit your skin, and of waking up after a night of just like a solid sleep with no medication, no weed, no, just that. Waking up with sunrise, feeling that like, electromagnetic spectrum getting just like the red, and feeling what it feels like to be hydrated and to take like thorough poops in the morning because you ate well, you drank water, you moved your body, not in an obsessive way where you're stressed out and anxious and therefore retaining, right? Holding, not even trusting your body to do what it does. And that's where I really want to go with this, which is like, how can we come back to trusting our bodies to do what they do? Because we've evolved for millions of years to be in these bodies. And it's like, the fact that we think that we have to go to someone, and again, business people would probably be like, Alyssa, don't say this, you're working against your own business, but it's real. The fact that we feel like we have to go to someone to have them tell us what to do is almost hilarious to me, because, and it's the irony of being a modern human. We're so mentally aware that we forget that our bodies are taking in exponentially more information than our mind could ever process, and therefore have feedback about what it's taking in. And you're so right when you say just those simple processes. Like, I could say what I just said and someone could be like, oh my God, how do I ever know all of that information? Don't get stuck there, right? Because what Leela just referred to, which is like food that feels good to eat and that gives you energy and that makes you feel grounded into your body, drinking enough water, sleeping well, self-pleasuring, connecting with humans that, you really feel safe with, sleeping, moving in a way that feels nourishing, not forced, but that feels nourishing. One day that might be, you know, getting under a heavy squat bar and squatting. The next day it might be just doing some super light yoga or just stretching, honoring the body's cues and rhythms, which it has evolved to have. And the best thing we can do, the most radical thing we can do, especially these days, is just trust our bodies to be like, hey, I'm communicating with you all the time, number one. Number two, if you listen to what I'm actually communicating with you, which is going to be different person to person, there are very simple steps that you can take in response to the body's communication. And then that cycle builds trust, like radical trust, because you're like, oh, if I fuck something up, I'm going to hear about it from my body. I'm not going to poop tomorrow morning, or I'm going to wake up with a pounding headache, or I'm going to wake up really low energy. And that's not bad, right? I don't want to demonize any of those things. They're feedback. If they become quote unquote bad or disadvantages when we ignore them and they become part of our baseline.
Yeah, it's so incredible how much wisdom, and even like a layer deeper than that would be like, well, I love this because it took me forever to learn that. And I realized that I was living with my body as if my body were something I needed to control, not something that was wise and was giving me feedback and information and guidance. So much so around my health, right? Like it's giving me guidance on what things I should do more of and what things I probably should lessen, and, you know, what things I should totally avoid. Like it's totally telling me that every second. And then even more subtly, it's telling me, like, it's giving me subtle guidance around intuition and energetics and like environments that I really thrive in, people I should connect with. Like, and that was a piece that like kind of everything like slammed together when I finally realized that, because I was super curious, like, what is intuition? Like, how do I hear that? Like, is this just like this random thing that like drops in from above? And like, where does that happen? And I remember finally, like, as I started to get more inside my body, and I mean like literally learn how to live presently, breathing more, sleeping better, not escaping myself. For me, that looks like living a primarily sober life, and not in eating. I don't eat processed foods or sugar simply because I don't feel good when I do. Like I can feel myself like I'm, you know, when I say like when I'm not in my body, people are like, what the fuck does that mean? But I feel like people know what that means. It's almost like I lean out of myself a little bit or float above myself a little bit. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel grounded. Like I just feel flighty, or like I'm dissociating a little bit. And whenever I'm eating, I eat something or bring something in, even if it's like too much stimulus just from outside, like there's a TV going on, someone's talking to me, there's a lot of sound, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of lights. I'm like, oh my God, I can't feel totally here, versus like watching the sunrise or just standing on top of a mountain, taking a deep breath. It's like it's a lot easier to just be inside of my body. But the point here is that as I started to integrate super simple practices, breathing better, sleeping better, eating simpler, just really honing in on living presently, I felt myself reintegrate to where like living in my body became a place where I wanted to live. And like I use the phrase a lot, like my body is a safe place to live. And for a long time, when I was younger, it was not a safe place to live. I tried to control it. I judged it. I criticized it. I didn't take care of it. And so therefore, like, why would I really want to be inside of it? And so as I started to reaffirm that and act in accordance with that, my like true self, my intuition, my guidance, my connection to life also started to become louder, and I could hear myself more, which I think is something I didn't think would happen when I started to honor my body more. I thought like, you know, being spiritual and being intuitive meant I had to live like this flighty, like oddly, I don't even know really what I was thinking it was going to be, but it's the complete opposite. And the more I live in my humanness, the more I honor my actual like meat of my body, the food of my life, the breath in my lungs, like my nervous system, paying attention to the cyclical part of who I am. All of a sudden, my actual spirituality came to life, meaning like nothing ever happens outside of my body. Like I can't love outside of my body, can't experience anything 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes in the future, like it happens here and now. The more I can live presently and take care of my form, the more I hear my truth, the more I hear intuition, my guidance, the really loud, intense feedback, but also the subtle feedback I'm getting of like, talk to that person, like do that thing, follow that tiny breadcrumb that like, if I wasn't present or just I wasn't listening, my body wouldn't hear that.
Right.
And all the best things in my life have come from when I have listened to what I've heard from within me, not what I heard from without me, always. So that's been like a secret gift, I feel like, of reintegrating and honoring my body more I've actually been honoring my soul or my spirit more, my inside, like the truest part of me, which I thought those two things lived very far apart, but they don't. Like my body is my soul's chance to be here. The more I live inside my body, the more I hear the guidance of what I really came here to do. And I think if we remembered that, and this is kind of me blending my because I do work in the world of really high level spiritual leaders, or just and devotion to the sacred, and like all of that is like the truest of the true for me. And being a goddamn human, which I think is what your Instagram bio says, is also the truest of the true, because I cannot be one without the other. And like to live an awakened, happy life, I think is honoring both of those elements and realize that where they blend is the sweet spot.
Right. Well, one can't exist without the other, right? Yeah. It's like, if we all of a sudden weren't goddamn humans, you need the other piece be. It's like, it's gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's where, really coming back to the overwhelming experience of being a human. That's where we get to, put our spirituality through a process, through a refinement, through a practice that leads to better understanding. And something that you just alluded to, and this I actually use a lot, and this is what drew me to begin to integrate human design specifically into nourishment with my clients, is that what I saw almost all the time is that both myself and the client would almost from the beginning of our work together know exactly what needed to happen. However, as you know from working with me, I'm not super assertive, right? I'll give information. I'll say, hey, this is what I kind of think you should do. You do what feels the best for you. And what I was seeing a lot is that people knew it was the best for them, but they wanted permission to do it. And human design brings people back to their inner authority, right? You follow a strategy. Human design is not a belief system. It's like for those of you who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, tell us what it is.
Like it explains the mechanics of our aura and then tells us how to utilize those mechanics to move through the world in a way that is full of ease for our unique beingness, for our unique energy. And in doing so, it gives us a strategy that says, hey, for your energetic type, for the mechanics of your aura, here's the best way to move through the world. But don't take our word for it. Freaking try it, try it on, see how it goes. Follow your inner authority as you practice your strategy. And so it's an experiment, truly. And it should never be taken as a belief system. Like, just don't, especially if you've never heard of it before and you go look it up, which totally do it. It's fascinating. But what I was realizing is that people, to your point, always have so much information coming in. And when we use the word intuition, it does feel like it's not tangible, right? It's like, what the fuck is intuition? Huh?
Yeah, you got to be special.
Or like, well, my crazy yoga teacher says they have intuition, No, everyone has intuition. And it's something that we forget is a survival mechanism. It's our body filtering an immense amount of information and subtly conveying it to us. Mm-hmm. And so, like you just said, when you are grounded into those practices, the goddamn human practices that we kind of turn our nose up, like, oh, I take big poops, I sleep, I drink water, I need food, like how basic, Mm-hmm. And it is. And it also liberates us by taking care of our very foundational needs. It liberates us to have extra awareness freed up to do things that are the spiritual, the high caliber, consciousness, the collective consciousness. Think about when you're hangry. I say this all the time when I have clients that are practitioners. I'm like, think about when you're hangry. Think about when you haven't eaten enough. Think about when you have a blood sugar spike and a blood sugar drop. Are you ever at your sharpest in those moments? No, you're not. It's just basic. You're not. So if we can bend back and go, okay, those foundational practices are truly foundational. Without them, I cannot ascend into any kind of anything that I really want, because I need to have my base needs met. And that's going to look different for everyone, really, truly, like, hear that, because that doesn't mean you need to eat 3 square meals a day. It doesn't mean you need to eat a certain diet. Like, listen to your body and have fun experimenting with how you get there. But the two go together, the high end, high caliber spiritual practice and the goddamn human practice. They are on the same spectrum. And without one, we do not have the other.
It's like, as far as you go super far on one, and eventually you hit the other one. You just loop back into itself. Yeah,
exactly.
What do you feel like, if someone wanted to start integrating almost just basic nourishment principles that could maybe start to break them out of thinking that one diet is going to be it? Like, are there basic things that you would guide them to do, or like some tactile, even just caring for yourself to like slow down, or just start to listen to the body more? Like, what would those things be?
Yeah, totally. The radical side of me says, I'm going to say that one first, and then I'll kind of give the more tempered answer, because again, we all have very different experiences with eating. So the radical side of me is like, if you were sitting with me on my back porch and you're not paying me as a client and you ask me that question, I'm like, I would say, yeah, drop all the diet structures, like drop them full force, immediately, just drop them, and start to keep a journal and just tune into just your body's feedback as you try to just eat. Like, don't try to take any kind of diet aside from, okay, as humans, we generally feel the best when we eat foods that are less processed.
Right.
So take that as like a baseline, which we know this for a fact because we've evolved eating more whole foods, and we've evolved quite well, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Right. So
doing pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
That being said, no, I won't even go there. But yeah, so, first and foremost, drop the diet structures. Second to that, eat more whole foods. However, monitor the moral part. Like, monitor when you go for, let's just say, a Snickers bar or some Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Just monitor, like, hey, I'm not going to assign any value to this, because the moment I do, how I digest it's going to be different. And I'm going to soberly look at, how did I feel after that pint of Ben & Jerry's? How did I feel after that Snickers? And make some notes about it, and do it as an experiment, knowing that everything you eat and every drop of feedback that you get from your body is how you're going to hone your understanding, your fundamental nourishment pattern for you as an individual. And also, as you are doing that, focus on really basic things: food, sunlight. Like, doesn't matter where you live, get outside in the sun for, even if you work in an office in the city, go take a couple laps around the block. Let sun stream into your eyes. Don't
like my favorite form of nourishment.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah. I loved the first call we ever had when you were like, yes, so can I just like lay in the sun? Or no, you were like, I'm laying in the sun with my eyes closed listening to you. And I was like,
Yeah. You're like, do you like to like do things in the sun? I'm like, no, you usually just like to lay in it.
Yeah.
I don't even do anything. So I just lay inside of it.
Good when I have sunlight.
So good.
Probably we're trending that way. Who knows? That's a whole nother podcast. You not start laying out in the sun and not eating people, you will turn into raisins.
Yeah, no. And I think you were saying, before I interrupted, with saying that sunlight was mine. The other avenues, which one you've touched on like once, and I know you're going to say pleasure.
Yes.
That also is a very human need, and it's a form of nourishment: pleasure, creativity, breathing, being in nature.
Yes.
This was on your list. I think I cut you off.
No, you're sunlight, sleep, self-pleasure, food, hydration, and movement. Those are like, when I work with clients through the avenues of nourishment, those are the really big ones that I always try to bring it back to. And, you know, for those of you going, wait, they just said self-pleasure and hanging on that. Yes, self-pleasure, as in self-massage, masturbation, you know, touching yourself with no goal in mind, or touching yourself, breathing, just focusing on the sensation. And here's why that one consistently comes up, is because what we suppress gets really confused, right? Like that energy of the need, like you just said, whether it's like animal lust or the highest form of spiritual love, they're again existing on the same spectrum, and they are energy that we move through our bodies as living beings. And when they get shut down or they get pushed down, we start to look for other avenues of expressing them. And oftentimes, more often than not, I see this with a lot of people, myself included, if we don't have adequate expression of that need for pleasure, receiving it, giving it, and sexual energy, creative energy, we overeat or we don't eat enough. It's the emptiness fullness spectrum, right? And so really looking at that as an avenue of nourishment along with all of the others, and breath work, of course, just learning how to breathe, generally speaking. Leela, you were one of the people that recommended that book. Is it Breath? Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that book was phenomenal. Like, so there's just so many ways to come back to the simplicity of being a human and learning how to explore all the avenues that nourish us, including spirituality.
Right. Yeah, it's just like remembering that the simplest things, actually, like learning how to value the most simple things.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and really trusting, there's a piece of like having to go against what we've been conditioned or taught that I don't have to do all those things in order to obtain this. I can just do the simple stuff. Like, what if I just didn't focus on all of that outrageous, like buying the next courses and reading all of the things and doing all of the, like, I've done most of that shit. And I'm here to tell you, save your money and just like do the simple things, like just sit still, just go walk on the earth, just take a deep breath, just practice gratitude, just connect into yourself, just actually receive the nourishment of food or water or breath as you breathe it in. Like, I remember even just offering a blessing or a prayer or a moment of thanks over your food or your water or every breath you take, or just to your body, will do so much more than this elaborate thing that we've been conditioned to think will somehow make us a superior human. It's like, it won't actually. And I wish I didn't like fall to that lie for so long, but I did. And the most powerful practices have been the most simple.
Yes.
And really revelatory, because in my body is where I experience the fullness of my life. And if I don't feel good in my body, I can't experience that. And then just like, I want to just tie it back to how we started, because I think for me, in still moving through this process of healing my migraines and my cycle, and having you in my corner for that, really, I did have to give myself permission, and you helped me with that, of extending what I thought was the correct style of eating, tuning in towards myself and realizing I think I'm going to need to make some shifts. And in that, I've kind of like, now I'm eating like vegan, but I eat fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I take beef liver supplements, which I think were two of the biggest things to help me heal my migraines.
Yeah.
But I don't eat eggs anymore, because I realized when I eat eggs, it actually triggers a headache. And I wasn't noticing that because I was eating a lot of them because I wasn't eating any other animal proteins. And then I've cut out nuts and seeds. I think I was eating way too many of those because I also wasn't having enough protein. So I was feeling super depleted. It was like kind of a lot of, personally, and that's not the correct way for anyone else to eat either, like that is just shifts that I had to make. And then take inventory every day and notice, like, am I pooping better? Am I eating better? Do I want to have sex with my partner? Like, do I like my life? Like, is my head not hurting? And how's my period? So I had to tune into those things. And the reality is, like, I started feeling so much better. And you can't fight with that, right? So I couldn't fight with that. I'm realizing, like, the way that I'm here to serve and to show up, like, I can't be debilitated for 6 days out of the month with this headache like this. Like, I have to do something. And so I'm responsible for working through whatever personal or moral resistance I have towards that, and, invoking any sort of like gratitude or prayer, recognition for life, or deeper appreciation, or whatever I had to do personally to orient myself to being okay with that shift. And then there's also like the social piece too, of like, what will my whole community think if I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian or this or that or whatever. And at the end of the day, I believe that people should have choice for their own bodies and what works for them. And if I actually believe that, then I have to like stand by that and embody that, and then encourage that in the people that I'm around as well. Cause I can't be saying that, but then being like, but there's this one thing that we need to do in order for us to be morally correct. So it definitely helped me kind of break some mental constructs that I didn't realize I was causing suffering for myself. And I'm also open to that shifting and changing.
Right. And that is something to hang on to, I think, I know, which is we are always shifting and changing. Our environments are always shifting and changing. And so this is where it comes back to, something I remind people when they cut a huge food group out, whether it's meat, wheat, sugar, alcohol, vegetables, fruit, whatever it is. In order to cut something out, you do have to create patterns mentally that say that is bad. Otherwise, it will be impossible for you to cut it out. And so we all condition ourselves when we shift our diets. And so if we really can focus on going, no, this isn't necessarily bad. It's just not what I personally need at this time in this cycle of my life. That I think allows for, even in a community setting and space, a lot more understanding for everyone, including ourselves. And this even ripples out into, we keep coming back to trust, right? And when we started this conversation, we talked about those kind of, let's just say, the spiritual bypassing form of diet, right? Like going with a diet, sticking with it, and then bypassing any foundational needs or kind of issues that come up because you're really set on this diet. Mm-hmm. That is trust too. And if we're going to trust something outside of ourselves, how about we turn it in and start trusting our own bodies? And this is where really one of the most important things we can say, or I can say on this whole podcast, is trust is earned. So at the beginning of this process, if you feel incredibly inspired after you listen to this podcast and you're like, I want to go set out to understand how to eat for my own needs and explore my avenues of nourishment, I want to just leave you with this, at least it's a truth in my experience, that trust is earned. And so at the beginning of this process, you might feel some trepidation. That's why I said keep the journal, because that's how you'll recognize patterns. You might feel some like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. You might feel tempted to get online and start looking at information. But trust is earned. So if you keep coming back to your body and you take the quote unquote mistakes or the less than optimal moments and you go, I am my own experiment. These are learning moments. What did this just try to teach me? You will earn the trust of your own body, and you will earn the trust of your own mind in relation to how it perceives your actions and your body. And that is like truly one of the most fundamental pieces of our nourishment, because it's never static. It's always dynamic, always. And so if we can trust ourselves to be listening and to be knowing and to be in our body, even when it's uncomfortable, there's a lot that comes back to us information-wise on how to respond better, take action better, and continue learning, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I totally agree that trust is earned. Consistency and compassion are like the two things I talk about with trust, of like building self-trust, and then also just building trust with other people. If someone shows up, they're not compassionate, and they show up every like third Thursday, like there's no consistency there. Like, how do I actually start to rely on them? So the same thing with ourselves. Like, am I compassionate? Do I speak to myself kindly? And then do I show up in a consistent way to notice what's happening? Those two things together, like, we do earn our own trust. And then we start to have this internal experience that's more harmonious, trustworthy, consistent, compassionate. We like living in our body. It changes everything. Yeah, so good. I hope that this was helpful for people. I loved the way that this went, because I feel like we touched on a lot of stuff. Is there I guess maybe just tell everyone what you do or how they can find you, or if there's any other nuggets that you want to give them, like huge takeaway. I feel like there's lots of takeaways already, but any last
I'm like,
thing?
okay, things I do. I eat, I shit, I sleep, I make love, I go for walks, I breathe.
There you go. Yeah, that's it. Do all those things and do them as much as possible. Yeah. Oh, and one thing I was going to say, this is also like just have more conversations about this in compassionate places.
Yeah.
I was thinking like how freeing this was to talk with you about it, and our work together has been really freeing for me personally, and has helped me feel more vital. Of like, ask someone to support you. You speak with your friends, like talk about it in a way that isn't critical or judgmental, like stay curious and open and find support systems, or, work. The human design piece is also, we'll have to do another one just specifically on human design. If you haven't looked into that, like do some self-study and find community that feels supportive, and, work with people who encourage you to trust yourself. That would be my biggest advice, specifically around food and well-being, is like, if anyone outside of you says that they have something that you don't,
yes,
we'll just go ahead and cancel that, or like just not engage, and then, work with people that help you remember your own sovereignty and power and ability to trust like what's happening for you. You definitely wore that for me, and I so appreciate it. And I'm so happy I reached out too, because I also had hesitation around it, like, shouldn't I have already figured this out? Like, people look up to me for these kinds of things. I'm like, no, I actually just really need someone to stand there and like shine some unbiased light and perspective to help me find my way out of this. So there's never a point when locking elbows with somebody is a bad idea for the most part. So highly recommend that. Yeah. So tell us what you do.
Well, so something I want to just touch on, and it really relates to everything I do, is this concept of resistance, right? Like there's generally going to be resistance to things that we are going to be helpful. And resistance is different than a full body no, or like sure, that's not resistance. Resistance is like, I know I should do this, want to do this, need to do this. And some things like ego, right, is like, you should already know this. And it's like, there's probably there's so many things that I could probably have someone look at my lifestyle and diet just because they can stand bird's eye view and give me feedback. It's perspective is everything. So, and that is essentially the bridge to what do I do? Well, I always joke with
I am the bird's eye view. I'm a projector.
And I've got a lot of information. And so what I always say is like, I'm the grand organizer or orchestrator. Like I can see all the pieces. I spend a lot of time like behind the scenes as I'm working with clients, especially at the beginning, just feeling into patterning and observing patterning in, forms you've filled out and conversations we had, and then going, okay, what are some of the most poignant things that are getting stuck? What are some of the patterns that are not serving? And then really just creating organization around those, but organization that isn't forceful, and that is, hey, how does this feel for you? And using, a lot of people are like, how the hell do you do as a dietitian nourishment with human design? And what I always say is I kind of smirk and I say, well, human design is a fabulous entry point to so many things that would otherwise be offensive, right? Like it's true. It's so true. Like you talk to a non-sacral being who has an open sacral center, and you have a sacral center, but it amplifies energy rather than has access to it consistently. And that's an entry point right there, just to know that, because you just say, well, do you know when enough is enough? And usually you get the, oh shit eyes, and so it's like, okay, well, how is that overdoing it impacting your diet, how you eat, your needs? Are you relying on sugar and caffeine all the time? And there's like a brilliant, as one of my professors said, harmonious chaos that is happening all the time in our bodies. And that's what I try to tune into. What's the wrench that's getting stuck, that's making it chaotic, but the harmony's missing? And so I try to, like, with every client, whether it's just human design or avenues of nourishment, really tune in and go, okay, where's the wrench? How can we pull it out so that your body can go back to that harmonious chaos rather than just feeling the chaos?
Yeah. Wow. Holy shit. Yeah. So human design, if you want your human design chart read, hit a sister up. She did mine and it was hugely helpful. I've listened to it many times. And then avenues of nourishment. And what else do you have going on? How can they find you?
You can find me. So my website, I'm always accessible through nourishmentnutrition.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at Alyssa_Troob, Troob. You can put it in the show notes. I'll send you a link. And yeah, there's, you can find me there. You can find me, I'm all over the place. Just type in my
reach to me.
You'll regret you did it. No. Yeah, that's that. And who knows where we'll be as time moves. There's definitely some. Also, a note, if this comes out really quick, I'm not on Instagram right now.
So, you aren't? Did you get hacked? I'm just kidding.
No, not your love there. I just took a Mercury retrograde break. I usually do it once a year, and I was like, this is the time and the place, and definitely through some shifts as far as like how I show up on that platform. So
yeah, it's beautiful. Life is good without it. Apparently it was down the other day, and I didn't even know because I don't have one right now. It was Facebook and Instagram and everything was shut, and I didn't feel any stress because I was like, I ain't got it. Yeah,
retrograde, man.
Yeah. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. We'll probably have to do this again. I'm gonna get some feedback from everybody.
I'd be honored to do it again. And thank you.
Yeah, I'll do like a continuum, dissect it even more.
Yeah, and for real, thank you for everyone who tuned in, even if it was triggering or difficult to listen to, because it is such an intimate space in our lives that I do appreciate you for tuning in.
Same. All right. Love you. Thank you. Thanks for being here, everyone. This is Leela Dilla, and I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Heart Space Podcast. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Please visit leeladilla.com to check out the courses, retreats, or other deep dives that I have coming up. And remember, if you are a woman looking for a place to learn, expand, and awaken to your highest potential, I'd absolutely love to have you as a part of my women's community, the Heart Space. Offering yoga classes every month, meditations, breathwork, wisdom workshops, sacred ritual, and all things feminine healing. I would love to have you as a part of our tribe. If you're interested in this, please visit leeladilla.com/the-heart-space. Sending you massive love and gratitude. Catch you on the flip side. Namaste.